Hi, I'm Beckme Berserker, and welcome to the 8th episode of my Let's Roll series, which up to now has focused on the generation and progression of each core Beckme Dungeons & Dragons character class. In this episode, however, we're venturing into the first of two optional classes, and that is the Druid. If you don't know what Beckme is, I strongly recommend you watch my Beckme playlist, link on the screen, where I dive into many aspects of the game and make the case why I think it's the greatest version of the Dungeons & Dragons game. Before I continue with exploring the generation of a Beckme Druid, I should first explain a few things about the class. I mean, why have I been showing only 7 classes in my previous Let's Roll videos, of which the Druid didn't feature? Well, the Beckme Druid first made an appearance in the Companion Rules in 1984. However, the class was presented as an optional path for an existing cleric. To be precise, you could only become a Druid after achieving 9th level as a cleric of neutral alignment, whereby the cleric would choose a life dedicated to nature and the preservation or protection of woodlands. I'll go into all that soon enough, but the main point here is that, in the rules as written, you could not begin life as a Druid. The reasoning for this has been frequently discussed among Beckme players, and I'll touch more on this later. However, the Druid was carried forward into the Rules Cyclopedia as one of 2 optional classes, with little to no changes from the original concept. As I roll up a Druid, I will explore the character class as presented in the Rules Cyclopedia, released in 1991. Once generated, we will level them up to examine how the class has progressed and what's changed. As I'm using the Rules Cyclopedia, I will be including the skills rules and the weapon mastery rules. By the way, if as I go along you wonder what the generation of the other classes look like, I've put a link to the Let's Roll playlist in the description for you to follow, but for now, let's dive into the Druid. As I've already alluded to, a cleric of 9th to 29th level may choose to abandon their life in civilized areas to take up the study of nature instead. The cleric is not held to having to make their choice at 9th level. The main stipulation in being able to choose to become a Druid is that the cleric must be neutral in alignment. There are no lawful or chaotic Druids. This is due to their study of the balance of nature. We are told that the Druid must find a woodland home to live in for 1 to 4 months, where they meditate to become a Druid. During this time they are visited by a high-level Druid who tests their resolve and teaches them the Druidic principles. In-game you could have a lot of fun with this concept, but mechanically you would just tell the DM you want to become a Druid and they would roll 1d4 to let you know how many months it takes. Druids may only use and wear equipment that has once been living, such as wood, leather or furs. Anything that wasn't once alive is referred to as dead. We are told that dead items, such as tools created out of metal or stone, are repulsive to Druids, so much so that they won't touch them if they can help it. Despite this, I really like this feature of Druids, and it alludes to the same reactions that some cultures might have to pork or pig leather, so maybe not as incredulous as it might first seem. Apart from this, Druids are restricted in their use of cutting and piercing weapons in the same way a cleric is. That is, they're not allowed to use them. A significant change when a cleric becomes a Druid is that they lose their ability to turn undead. This is a big loss, so someone playing a Druid would really need to consider this. However, Druids do not lose their clerical spellcasting ability on becoming a Druid. Druids gain 4 extra Druidic spells of each spell level, which they can choose to memorize from. This means their spell lists are a little greater than the clerics. I'll go a bit more into Druidic spellcasting later in the video. Finally, access to 30th level and above is severely restricted, whereby a Druid achieving this level must dislodge one who already occupies it through single combat. I'll also go into this in a bit more detail later in the video. But before we get into the generation of a Druid, let's first examine the fact that Druids do not begin at 1st level. There has been some discussion in Beckme groups around why a cleric must wait till 9th level before becoming a Druid, and the only real barrier to starting earlier would be the subject of worthiness in the eyes of the high-level Druid during the meditation stage. That is, if you're below 9th level, you're not worthy. That said, nothing is really broken if a Dungeon Master wanted to do away with this concept and a player really wanted to start with a 1st level Druid, although they would be underpowered when compared to a cleric of the same level, who can wear any armour and turn undead. In my opinion, the Druid is a class for players who prioritise flavour over capability, so if a player really wanted to be a Druid from 1st level, I'd let them, knowing they were going into the class with their eyes wide open. Anyway, that's the basics of a Druid, but as we're following the rules as written, we won't be starting at 1st level, we'll be starting at 9th. With that in mind, let's roll. Here's the front of my 9th level cleric's character sheet. Obviously, this episode is going to miss out on the generation of ability scores and what comes with it, so if you want more information on that, please watch any of my previous episodes. Right, this cleric has decided to take the hippie trail and become a druid, so let's change him to one immediately. He's already meditated in some faraway hut deep within the Dimrak forest and been converted to the path of nature by a strange man with twigs in his hair and a bone through his nose. Our druid hasn't quite gone that far stylistically, but will soften his look with a portrait given to us in the companion rules. But also, let's give him a suitable druid name. We weren't offered one with the introduction to this class, so I'm going with Swampy. He's fed up with the hurly-burly of modern life and wants to go back to a time when everything wasn't so fast-paced, like before the introduction of the wheel. He wants to get in touch with his inner self, and if that means being outdoors in all seasons, then so be it. So let's call him Swampy the Beardy Weirdy. He's grown his hair out, and he smells a bit, but at least he lives far enough away for people not to notice. Okay, let's stick the important information about a druid on the right, here, so that we can refer to it as needed. The first bit of information we're told is that the druid's prime requisite is wisdom, so no difference from a cleric then. So in respect of Swampy's ability scores, there would be no detriment in choosing to become a druid in place of a cleric. Moving on to hit points, due to a druid starting at 9th level, they would not roll for any more hit points at this stage, instead gaining just 1 hit point per level from 10th all the way up to 36th. Swampy's hit points have already been determined when he achieved 9th level as a cleric, but on achieving 10th level, his hit points will increase to 43, and so on. Whilst on the subject of hit dice, we would need to note what the hit dice roll would be if allowing for playing a druid from 1st level. That of course would be 1d6 per level up to 9th, the same as a cleric's. However, I would be tempted to increase this to 1d8 per level for druids starting from 1st level, due to the hardy lifestyle they would be living. I mean, living out of doors is no joke, and certainly not like living in some place of worship like a cleric might. I'd keep the hit points from 10th level as +1 for continuity, but what do you think? Would an improved hit dice get you considering allowing druids from 1st level? I think it would certainly be a more attractive prospect to players. Anyway, on to saving throws. There is no difference in saving throw progression between a druid and a cleric, as we can see here, and this doesn't change all the way up to 36th level, so we can leave things as they are. The same can be said for combat and hit rolls. As we can see here, both the cleric and the druid, C and D here, share the same column for determining their hit rolls, so we can also leave the combat table on this part of the sheet alone. Now it's time to turn the sheet over and insert some further details, specifically information regarding Swampy's druid abilities, skill choices, and weapon mastery details. Let's first look at druid abilities. Well, I think this area is going to be quite lean. Okay, so we've got clerical spellcasting and druidic spellcasting, but the only other thing to note here are inabilities really, such as having to only use items that have once been living, and a repulsion to dead items, and a restriction to weapons that are not edged or piercing. Well, that's not very encouraging. In my opinion, I think there's one ability that seems to have been omitted from the druid class, and that is the ability to speak with animals. Granted, it is a 2nd level clerical spell, but after spending up to 4 months in the woods meditating etc., I think speak with animals is the least of abilities the druid should have come with, especially given that the other optional Beckme class, the Mystic, gains this ability at 6th level. Anyway, we're sticking to what's in the rules cyclopedia, so we'll remove my suggestion for now. Okay, so we've touched on druids and spellcasting. Let's focus on that a bit more. When a cleric becomes a druid, they gain access to the druidic spell list, which I've put on the screen for you to look at. In case you weren't aware, clerics and druids only have 7 levels of spells in Beckme. As you can see, it's a fairly limited list. This is because these spells are obtained in addition to the clerical spells they can already access, meaning druids can cast both clerical and druidic spells. However, we are told in the class description that druids may not obtain clerical spells that specifically affect good or evil creatures, such as Dispel Evil or Protection from Evil. However, there is a slight discrepancy in terms of wording here from the section of the rules about druidic spells, which states that druids may not cast clerical spells that affect alignments. This discrepancy is worth adjudicating in respect of how you personally run druids. As you may already know, there are only 3 alignments in Beckme: lawful, neutral, and chaotic, and none of these is inherently good or evil, requiring the decision making of the Dungeon Master when needed. So it might make sense to stick to the alignments articulation, especially given druids are so rigidly neutral. However, I think this would restrict the druid even further than I think was the original intent with the good and evil articulation. For instance, although the spell No Alignment doesn't affect the target, its reversible version, Confuse Alignment, does, by protecting the target from other no alignment spells. And then there is Speak with the Dead, where the target's alignment figures in the quality of information given, True Sight, where the target's alignment can be seen, and Holy Word, from which the target can benefit from being the same alignment as the caster. I suppose you could take the wording further to say that none of these actually affect the alignment per se, but the target's alignment determines the effect. That said, no clerical spell specifically affects lawful, neutral, or chaotic creatures, but there are plenty that affect good and evil. Personally, I see all this as a quirk in the BECMI rules in respect of squaring its alignment system with good and evil. My approach is to go with the articulation in the class description, as it's easier to identify spells that the druid can't access and doesn't render the druid even less powerful than he already is. That's my approach anyway, but I'd be interested in learning yours if it differs. Anyway, despite all this and the increased access to spells, druids may only memorize the same number of spells as a cleric of the same level, so they can't cast any more spells in a day. What's interesting to note is that druidic spells are not reversible. That said, nowhere in the rules does it state that druids can't continue to cast reversible clerical spells. Overall, druids have larger spell lists than clerics, some of them with decent offensive capability, so there is certainly potential for this class to shine. Let's have a quick look at that list of spells, which we can see averages to around 11 spells of each level to choose from when compared to a cleric's 8 and a magic user's 13. We can also see that as a 9th level druid, Swampy can memorize 11 spells in total from the list, his highest level of access being 4th level spells. Let me do a quick selection of memorized spells before we get back to the character sheet and make a note about good and evil spells next to the note about clerical spellcasting. We'll have a look back at the spell list when we examine 36th level Swampy, but for now let's move on to skills. Each character starts with a minimum of 4 skills, plus a character's intelligence adjustment. As Swampy is currently 9th level, we can see that he gained a further 2 skill points, making 6. As Swampy's intelligence score is only 9, he does not gain any bonus skill slots, so we have a total of 6 skills to choose from for now. But Swampy will gain an extra skill slot for every 4 levels above 9th, and we'll see how this works as his level increases. In the meantime, he chooses Animal Training Falcon, Nature Lore, Riding Moose, why not, Snares, Survival Woods, and Tracking. These are recorded on the sheet along with their relevant ability score values, which must be rolled equal to or under to succeed in a skill check. Now it's time to move on to Weapon Mastery. As Swampy is 9th level, he had a total of 5 Weapon Mastery attempts. The first 2 must be spent on gaining Basic Mastery with 2 separate weapons. When it comes to Weapon Mastery, a human class only begins with Basic Mastery in 2 weapons, except for the Fighter, who begins with 4. In all other weapons, humans are judged to be unskilled, meaning they deal half damage, and also receive a -1 penalty to hit with missile weapons. When Swampy began life as a cleric, he wielded his trusty Warhammer, and also used a sling for ranged combat. For simplicity's sake, we shall stick with these weapons, except now Swampy's Warhammer is made from hardwood, and hits just as painfully. Let's enter the details for these weapons at Basic Mastery into the table. However, Swampy will invest his 3 extra slots into becoming a master of the Warhammer, so let's edit that once more to show his awesome power. I'm not going to delve into equipping my character or determining their wealth, as it won't really add to the information I'm trying to relay here, so let's say hello to Swampy the Beardy Weirdy, our 9th level druid, a character who avoids contact with civilization as much as possible, and has become a little more than feral over the intervening years. Swampy has become one with the land, a legendary, almost mythical green man of the woods, one that is talked about in hushed whispers to goblin children, who are warned of the Swamp Man and his hammer made of an entire oak tree. In reality, Swampy becomes the most powerful druid in the known world, a journey that has caused him to face off with not just many enemies, but also his fellow druids. Let's explore that a bit further before we have a look at 36th level Swampy. As alluded to earlier, progress for a druid beyond 30th level is restricted. We are told that there are only 9 30th level druids, 7 at 31st level, 5 at 32nd level, 4 at 33rd level, 3 at 34th level, 2 at 35th level, and a single 36th level Great Druid. This is caveated by the fact that if your campaign world is particularly large, you can apply this methodology to continents rather than the whole world. When a druid achieves 30th level, they must locate and challenge one of the 9 already at that level to single unarmed combat where the use of spells is also allowed. The loser drops back to 29th level, adjusting their experience points to be 1 off 30th level. We are told that the losing druid may not issue another challenge until 3 months have passed. So clearly, reaching the highest levels of druidic power is extremely difficult. What I couldn't see stated in the rules is whether this is the format for achieving every level beyond 30th up to 36th. I would take it that it is, as it makes sense to do so. I do wonder if anyone has experience of playing a druid at this high level. It would be great to understand how this part of the process worked in your campaign. Anyway, now that we've examined the druid class, let's have a look at 36th level Swampy. As you can see, he has reached a maximum of 69 hit points, so not bad, but he still needs to make sure he's not caught unawares. As with all 36th level characters, the saving throw values are all at 2, meaning Swampy has a 95% chance to make any saving throw. In terms of his combat ability, his unmodified hit rolls for both melee and missile combat are quite respectable, with Swampy only needing a 2 to hit armor class 0. This would be positively impacted by his weapon mastery abilities. Turning to Swampy's spell sheet, we can see that he is able to memorize 9 spells of each level, giving him access to 63 spells a day, which is nothing to be sniffed at. As for skills, Swampy has elected to strengthen the skills he already has than obtain new ones. Therefore, he has spent his remaining 6 skill slots improving his Riding Moose skill and his Tracking skill. Turning to weapon mastery, Swampy gained a further 5 slots on his way to 36th level, and spent these on becoming Grandmaster with both his wooden warhammer and his sling. This does mean he's unskilled in every other weapon, but this is just for demonstration purposes. If you want to know more about what these weapon mastery numbers mean, then please follow the link on the screen and in the description for my video on the Master Rules, where I go into weapon mastery in more detail. So there you have it, Swampy the Beardy Weirdy, Great Druid of the known world, the Green Man incarnate, although he could do with a bath. Well, that's been an enjoyable walkthrough of the Druid, one that got me thinking particularly about making the class more accessible from first level. I think giving them speak with animals plus the 1d8 hit dice I spoke about earlier would go a long way in making this a worthwhile character to play at low levels. But that's just my opinion. What do you think of the Druid class? Have you been put off by the loss of Turn Undead and the better armor classes of Metal Armor? Or have you played one? What was it like? It would be great to know. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this 8th episode of Let's Roll. Please give it a like if you did indeed like it, and please hit the subscribe button if I've earned your future attention. If you'd like to thank me further, you can buy me a coffee, link on the screen or in the description. Otherwise, I'm BeckMeBerserker. Keep making your saving throws, and I hope to see you back here soon.